What is up, everyone? Welcome to this week's NerdBall Fantasy Football Show. I am back. Yes, your humble host, dendrologist specializing in the conservation of the endangered Robert Woods, and astronaut aboard the Pitts 8 Moon Expedition, Pete Rogers. And I am joined today by some of the nerds. We have resident old man, vice secretary of the Sam Darnold Hype Train Railroad LLC and the Duck Father Clark Barnes, and founder and lone member of the Devontae Adams' Average Club, a devout follower of the Anthony Lynn running back gospel, the Ginger Woodsman Nick Bodiford. Guys, how are we doing?
Doing great, Pete.
Good.
We're good, Pete. How are you?
I am good. My 2-week vacation was much needed and it was very restful. But as anyone who watches the show on YouTube or just can trust what I am reciting to you, we are moving. We're in the process of moving. So clearly it was a relaxing 2 weeks, and now we are thrown back into the thick of things as we are packing up to we're not leaving Ann Arbor, but we're just changing residences in order to make sure that we have 2 bedrooms for when the kiddos come. So that is what we are rapidly doing between today and tomorrow. So that's been exciting and stressful. Actually,
glad to have you back, Pete. It is much easier to just come on a podcast and expound upon football takes. Hosting is hard, and I am happy to hand back the baton.
Well, you did a tremendous job as host, and I do hope that our listeners appreciated my subtle undermining of Clark when he was hosting by not adding music, by not doing any of the fun extra. I was thinking about all to make it so that you hosting was less enjoyable to listen to than when I'm hosting.
We could name the episodes especially something like keeping it like raw or like raw dog with Clark Barnes. We'll work on it. Lots of interesting things to get to.
Raw dog with Clark Barnes is, I think, a really good podcast that people would listen to. Nick would be an instant subscriber. Look at him. He is so intrigued by it that he might give up his own weekly show so that Raw dog with Clark can be a thing. We have lots to get to. We are going to talk about the preseason. We're 2 weeks into it, and we are going to look at preseason stars who are now on our fantasy radars because if a headline doesn't rhyme, it's a crime, and you'll do time, and you'll never find a mine as rhythmic as mine. So best resign to making your headlines rhyme. That is the truth because it rhymes. Excellent. We each have 2 guys who've stood out so far in this preseason who maybe we were already initially high on in terms of their fantasy value in 2021, but that has only grown, or someone who we were kind of completely ignoring or not really thinking about, who now has suddenly become really prevalent in our fantasy plans as we approach draft season. Clark, why don't you start us off with your first player who you are your preseason star who is now on your radar?
All right. Well, keeping with the history we have on the show here, I kind of didn't follow the rules exactly. Perfect. So I'm going to talk about someone who surprised me, but is completely irrelevant to most leagues, and that's Zack Wilson, Jets quarterback, picked very highly this year. A lot of people who I respect, who are draft nicks, said that they weren't big fans of Zack Wilson coming out, and the history of the Jets did not bode well for a quarterback who people weren't sold on. So far, Zack Wilson in the offseason has looked competent. He's looked okay, hasn't looked great, but he hasn't totally wet the bed, and that's a really good step for young folks in the NFL.
Once the youngins don't wet the bed anymore, that's a sign of maturity. I know, as a future father, I know these things. Yeah. So it's a big step.
And so while Zack Wilson isn't appealing or relevant in one QB leagues, it is making me change my mind about Corey Davis and taking a shot on either Tevin Coleman or Ty Johnson. So Corey Davis, you're going to hear this from a lot of different outlets, and they're all accurate. Corey Davis is getting the ball like 80%, like 70 or 80% of the time when Zack Wilson throws the ball. So obviously, Zack Wilson is trying to target Corey Davis. And since Davis has looked good and Wilson has looked good, Corey Davis at 1106, I think, is an excellent pick. And then we have Tevin Coleman and Ty Johnson, who have basically no ADP going, or 11 and no ADP for Ty Johnson, 11 for Tevin Coleman. I think that they're great picks too. Unfortunately, we have Michael Carter. Just saw this at 702. That's going to be a pass.
Yeah, that's a bummer. I was really hyped on Michael Carter. Clark likes to keep the show and just NerdBall, the website, very positive. And we don't like to swear too much, but I'm going to break both of those rules by saying Corey Davis in the 11th round. If you do not draft him at that point, you are a fucking idiot. Like, I don't know what more this guy needs to do for you to not draft him. Like, Corey Davis we've talked about him before. I've gotten super excited about him before. He has done everything that you want to see from a wide receiver one on a new team in the preseason. He came out and absolutely dominated in terms of target share through the first quarter when the Jets were playing the Packers. Like, him still going as a wide receiver 50 is just doesn't make sense to me. And so, like, if come the 11th round, he's still available and you're not drafting him, I apologize, but you are no longer my friend. And maybe we were never friends, but you certainly we never futurely will be friends.
Yeah, so I like all of these takes, especially Pete's fire for Corey Davis. Pete, as an aside, if you're interested in more of the growth and bedwetting and all that kind of stuff, you should look up the McDonald triad. That'll throw your world on its head.
Perfect.
But that has nothing to do with
good
football.
Fatherly advice from Nick Botiford.
Yeah, Zack Wilson, I mean, the dude, I think he had like 10 touchdowns his final year in college. The dude is, I think he's got a much higher floor than a lot of people are considering and a lot higher of a ceiling. If these two Shanahan tree boys are able to produce something like what SF has, but, with the run game that we hope they implement with Trey Lance, Wilson can be a steal at this ADP. Don't forget about Elijah Moore, everybody. But yeah, Michael Carter's ADP, surely it's really high, and it's kind of a damn shame because I look for him on the waiver wire. I think Tevin Coleman is starting the season as the starting guy, like without question. And some frustrated drafters might drop Carter. That is.
Yeah, I like the call out there. And one of the notes I have here for Wilson is he's throwing to guys who seem awfully wide open. Which bodes well. There is a new offensive regime in town. And so it's the preseason. Guys are probably playing pretty vanilla, pretty soft. But, like Josh Allen last year, there's obviously things that coaches can do to make it easier on their quarterback. And it's hard to make sweeping judgments on the preseason, but it at least looks like that's what's happening in New York.
Yeah. Again, just like politely remind yourself when you're approaching your fantasy draft, this is not the Adam Gase-led Jets. If you love Kyle Shanahan and the San Francisco 49ers and what that offense does, you should be like 50% in love in what the Jets' potential could be, and then draft Jets players at a discount because next year you're not getting that discount. Nick, who's your first player that you're loving?
I've talked about him a little bit already, but I'm still just so excited. Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think he's going to turn some heads in his sophomore season. Coming out as a rookie, he was a little raw. He didn't get, a ton of work in college. I was rereading the SIS football rookie scouting portfolio on him, and they project him as like an inside-outside number 3 receiver guy, but he's an above average guy in size. His speed is totally fine, like hitting reasonable thresholds, but he jumped to 44.5-inch vertical. And just for reference, like DeAndre Hopkins, who's known as a body control like clasher, his vertical is something like 36.5. Getting up to 38 or 39 is astonishing. From what I was able to find, there are only 4 guys who have been able to jump since 2005 as high as DPJ did in the vertical, or higher. That is 44.5 inches. That is absolutely preposterous. I was watching some clips of his practice over the last couple of weeks, and there were a few shots where I was just sort of surprised because he looked small, and I realized it was because I'm just not used to seeing that size body being so high in the air. Like, you see some pretty springy little guys, 5'9", that can like really shoot up there, and it was strange, like visually sort of recalibrating what this size of a body looks like flying through the air. He's been drawing rave reviews. from all the local beat reporters. And ultimately, this is just, Clark mentioned this on our last Nerding Out podcast, I think it was. Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think he will have a standout role, but he's kind of the unique wide receiver handcuff. Odell, a lot of his injuries, like I'm not worried about his ACL reconstruction, but he's had a lot of soft tissue pulls, and he's just a lot older now. And while I'm optimistic that Odell can beat his, I think it's 5th round ADP, we don't know what kind of shape his body is in after having suffered all of these injuries. And he's also extremely cuttable. They can save $30 million over the next 2 years if they cut him after this season. Donovan Peoples-Jones will be entering just his 3rd year. He's cost controlled, and they've taken some shots on guys like they drafted Anthony Schwartz. They have Rashard Higgins locked up, but no one quite offers the long-term upside that Donovan Peoples-Jones does. And I would like to be in on him early rather than late. So draft him with one of your late round picks, and I don't think that anyone's going to be sorry.
One of the things I thoroughly enjoy about doing not only this show, but just the site in general and being in the fantasy football community is hearing what you, Clark, Nick, and Patty on the site and Jordan also in the podcast have to say, and the guys who you're particularly high on. So I love hearing the fact that Nick is super high on Donovan Peoples-Jones, because your insight and your excitement about him prior led me in a dynasty league to trade Nyheim Hines for Donovan Peoples-Jones, because I think you're totally right. Like, I personally, for Nyheim Hines, I don't necessarily know that the role that he saw last year is going to carry into this year. So that's my own. So I was like, I feel like I'm selling high on a guy who I don't think is going to be as productive this year. And Donovan Peoples-Jones, like the numbers all back it up, where he's just puts up these gaudy numbers. He put up gaudy numbers last year. And if his role does increase, he's going to be a reliable flex, maybe fringe wide receiver to, have those weeks where he puts up those kinds of really reliable numbers. And he's young, and the Browns can get out from Odell Beckham. Like, in a dynasty league, he seems like such an easy buy because of what the flashes we've already seen and the stability at the quarterback position and the coaching staff. Like, that the Browns offense, I feel like for a wide receiver is going to become pretty reliable to trust in them being productive there, as long as they're, talented, which Donovan Peoples-Jones seems to be wildly talented.
Yeah. And I'll just throw in, this is kind of the evolution of the things that we like to see if someone is going to break out. This story does not mean that you're going to break out, but if you're going to break out, this is kind of the trajectory we see. A guy who, got taken kind of late, but was just like absolute size speed freak, got his chance in a couple of games and has really impressed in his rookie season. And then everyone for the entire preseason ranted and raved about what a great camp he's having. And you see in the preseason games that he's having really, really good games. Again, it doesn't mean that he's going to break out, but that's the story that happens before someone breaks out. You just watch him play. He's also fun to play. And like you mentioned, Nick, I mean, it's the last pick of your draft type guy to take.
Yeah. And the wide receiver handcuff is a sneaky smart move as well. So my first guy is another guy who we have talked a lot about. Is a similar trajectory as Donovan Peoples-Jones, I would say. He's a rookie, and that's Terrace Marshall Jr. For the Carolina Panthers. I've written about him before. Nick's written about him before. There is so much potential here. He has played in all of the formations for the Panthers with DJ Moore out, which is great to see. That means that he's running alongside Robbie Anderson as that wide receiver too, regardless of the formation there. And now with DJ Moore coming back, likely he'll be back as a 3rd wide receiver playing in 11 personnel, but still he has made at least one big highlight play in each of the first 2 preseason games, which again, on the field, putting up results, making an impact. You love to see that. And then you turn to the things that have already gotten us excited about him coming into the preseason, which was similarity to Joe Brady, who's the offensive coordinator with Carolina. He's a big receiver who gives the Panthers a much needed red zone threat, something that they've been lacking the last couple of years. And I just think that all of these things, the hype that we had around him, Terrace Marshall coming into the season, and then seeing it play out through the first 2 preseason games, and the Carolina Panthers coaching staff giving him the opportunity to shine and him shining with that, those things coalescing is what you want from a fantasy manager standpoint to see. And I won't leave my drafts without Corey Davis, and I likely won't leave my drafts without Terrace Marshall Jr. just because I think that the potential there is pretty sky high with him.
Yeah, we might be looking at a situation like we did with the old Arkansas Razorbacks. Wasn't it like Darren McFadden and like two other just like absolutely otherworldly running backs kind of all playing together? If I could remember this, it would make it a better story. Anyway, Terrace Marshall Jr. looked super impressive. And by NFL standards, he is a big receiver now, like 6'2", 205. And it seems like he's playing like that. I think all of these wide receivers in Carolina, meaning DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and Terrace Marshall Jr. can play all of the positions. And that's just becoming more and more of a thing when you don't have someone like Devontae Adams or DeAndre Hopkins, where you just want him to play the X. Everyone can move around. And I think that's good for everyone. And this is a Sam Darnold endorsement segment.
Yes. Ooh.
If all of these guys are going to have good seasons, well then.
That's true. That's true. To your previous point, Clark, Daryl Mcfadden shared a backfield with the Arkansas Razorbacks with Felix Jones and Peyton Hillis. So there you go.
Three all-pros.
All pros.
Brain betrayed me on that one.
Cover of Madden 08. He's a Madden cover boy. That is an honor that can never be taken away from him.
So I like this one a lot. We like Pete said, I kind of broke down the slot receiver competition between Marshall and David Moore a couple months ago. And one thing from Pete's data that he provided to all of us behind the scenes that really stood out was Darnold. When Jamison Crowder was injured last year, Braxton Barrios was filling in, and he played a significant number of games, 8 or something like that as a fill-in. He was tied for second with like DeAndre Hopkins and somebody else.
Is he tied for second? Devontae Adams and Antonio Brown for?
Okay.
Are you saying targets per snap?
Targets per snap.
Yeah.
So Barrios is like a fine replacement level slot receiver. The fact that Darnold is looking to that position's way, like to that degree, is something that we all really need to take note of. I think that even if Marshall wasn't the extremely talented prospect that he is, we would still want to kind of be interested in this. Marshall, to Clark's point, just strikes me as a guy who was number 3 on the depth chart behind Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, and he would have been number 1 on a lot of other college teams. I think that this is a fantastic pick. There are a lot of mouths to feed there. Robbie Anderson is there, DJ Moore. Anderson is dealing with a hamstring
You also have
injury.
Christian McCaffrey coming back, which is like, I feel like that's also something where we don't want to overlook that because he is such a huge factor in that passing game. Nick,
That's true. He's probably McCaffrey probably sees over 100 targets. So that's valid. But we're looking for guys who have a route to like 100 plus targets in the 14th round or whatever. And Marshall absolutely qualifies.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not only just maybe he doesn't see triple digit targets, or maybe he doesn't even see like 70 targets, but that size and the need that the Panthers have for someone to be a red zone threat and a viable one at that, like that was Terrace Marshall did that at LSU. He was a viable red zone threat in Joe Brady's offense. And so I have a hard time not feeling like they're going to try to regain or recreate some magic in Carolina. And I also don't feel like it's too hot of a take to say, I mean, given how both of their careers have started, Terrace Marshall better than Jamar Chase. I feel like that's a clear and obvious statement right now.
So on the Jamar Chase thing, I watched the preseason game where he played and he had some drops. I have to point out on at least one of them, he made an executive decision and alligator armed a pass over the middle. And I'm for that. It's the preseason. He was going to get killed. And he's like, nope. So nope. I feel like, I don't know. I'm not going to kill him for making what I think is a very smart decision.
His ADP has like staggered. He has dropped. He's now tied with T. Higgins for the end of the 6th round. You can get T. Higgins. T. Higgins used to be a steal, and now he's the same value as Jamar Chase.
That's about okay. If he's just coming back to earth, that's about where he should be.
Jamar Chase going as the wide receiver 28.
If it's because of the preseason game, well, I don't. Come on, guys.
Ooh, Jamar Chase at wide receiver 28, man. I'm just like, basically, this podcast has turned into Pete telling everyone what wide receivers he's drafting. Because God, wide receiver, like Jamar Chase at the end of the 6th round, beginning of the 7th round, I will have a hard time saying no to that. Oh my goodness. All right. Before we go on to our second groups of preseason stars, I wanted to tell you, dear listeners, about our Patreon, patreon.com/nerdballff. We have all kinds of perks for those who wish to join, including joining our staff Discord channel to talk football during the season, our starts and set hotline, and you can also be able to submit questions to be answered live on the show. So if you want to support us, go to patreon.com/nerdballff. Also, if you're listening right now at this second, limited time offer going until Wednesday, we are doing a NerdBall draft kit guide booklet giveaway. So make sure you go onto Twitter, at NerdBallFF, follow us, retweet our pinned tweet there, and we will be pulling from that selection of people on Wednesday in order to who gets a free booklet with our draft guide, over 50 pages of positional breakdowns for rankings, articles, stats, and it's interactive, so you can bring it to your draft day and write down who you're taking where and be fully prepared to draft the best possible team when your draft comes. So make sure you do that. Twitter at NerdBallFF. Follow us and retweet our pinned tweet in order to be entered into this contest. All right.
I'd like to throw it out there. Just imagine being one of like 8 people on the planet who are going to have one of these things when in 30 years, NerdBall is featured on ESPN constantly.
Right.
We probably won't do Disney, but we'll talk about that later.
We'll talk about that later.
I'm excited.
We'll see what trajectory we go into. When Clark is bigger than Bill Simmons in sports media, you will be so happy that you have the first OG NerdBall draft kit booklet. If I weren't a member of this site, I would follow and retweet and subscribe to the podcast. Preseason stars now on our fantasy radars. Back to it. I'll start us off on this second round, and of course can't go through a podcast without talking about the Patriots some way, somehow. And Ramon J Stevenson has been absolutely tearing it up for the Patriots. 4th round running back. He's had 4 touchdowns in 2 games. Against the Eagles, he had 15 carries for 66 yards and a pair of touchdowns. And then against Washington in week 1, 10 carries, 127 yards and 2 touchdowns as well. A lot of that rushing came from, I think he had like a 91-yard rush where he booked it down the field, which is impressive for a man of his size and stature. Now, before we get way too excited and before we're like, oh my God, panic about Damian Harris, nay. I am still firmly on the Damian Harris train because Damian Harris was the Patriots starting running back. He played all of the snaps with Cam Newton, only coming off of the field when James White on the occasional 3rd down. Ramon J Stevenson was firmly with the second team. He was playing with Mac Jones. He was getting the touches against a second defensive front. Now, the reason why I do want to bring him up is not just, beautiful homerism, but also because he is someone who I would certainly be targeting in dynasty leagues if he's sitting there on your waiver wire. But also, Nick has been on this from the get-go, and I know he talked about it a little bit on last week's NerdBall, or maybe 2 weeks ago's Nerding Out show. But the NFL's COVID protocol list, Cam Newton is currently being held out of practice because he seemingly came in close contact with someone with COVID. Because he's being held out for a certain period of time, one can ascertain or assume that Cam Newton is not vaccinated. If Cam Newton misses any time and Mac Jones steps into that starting role, suddenly the goal line work is not Cam Newton's. It is whatever running back is back there. We have seen goal line production on the Patriots be fantasy viable, going all the way back to Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, but more recently, Legarrette Blount. Those guys who have been able to lock in that double-digit touchdown production because they just are the only ones who get the ball 5 yards out. Ramon J Stevenson has shown that he can do that, and he has done that throughout the preseason, and that could be a role that he finds himself becoming more and more a part of as we move further into the NFL season. And at the very least, if not, he is someone you should certainly be adding in dynasty and holding on to because he has looked really good for a 4th round pick and is due to have a huge role in the coming seasons.
Yeah. Fortunately, this preseason, we haven't seen a ton of injuries at the running back position. There's been one high profile injury in Los Angeles, but then that's been about it. What I love about this one is Stevenson is just a complete shot, but people really seem to be bouncing off of him a lot in the NFL, just like they did in college.
Can I give some breaking news? Speaking about how Clark just said no running backs have been injured. It's not critical, though. I do like all of your faces right now. Darrell Henderson hurt his thumb per Sean McVay, who literally is just off the field, and he doesn't have a sense of how bad it is or what next steps are. Darrell Henderson did not return to practice. So the Rams backfield getting.
If you watch this show, you know how Nick and I, how much we love fantasy, because Pete says there's an injury in both of your eyes.
Just go whites of your eyes.
No.
I mean,
so yeah, the Henderson, I think he just banged it on a helmet. Maybe it broke, but guys play with casts on their fingers from time to time, so hopefully that's not a big deal. Who was it that we were talking about before him though? Ramon J Stevenson.
Nick's brain just blacked out as soon as you heard major running back injury.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything. Where am I? What day is it? Who am I?
So Stevenson, he's kind of unathletic, but I like to see him breaking long runs. That's reassuring for guys who come in with subpar athleticism profiles. I think he's worthwhile taking a shot on. The team is built to be a power running team. To your point about Cam Newton and the COVID protocol, it appears as though he still did not get vaccinated after he tested positive last year, which I thought that he did, because he talked a lot this offseason about how mentally messed him up.
But maybe not.
But so I read through the COVID protocols this morning, and what the protocol that he is in, that you don't go into if you are vaccinated. So I think that that's a valid point to make. This does kind of kick Damian Harris's ADP in the crotch a little bit for me, just because Stevenson has been playing really well and Belichick likes to rotate his backs. I don't think that I would stop drafting Harris, but I might just now start drafting Ramon J Stevenson. I don't think he's got a terribly high season though, so I don't know, depending on your scoring format, like a full point PPR league, this might be an avoid or an ignore.
Yeah. Damian Harris still going in the middle to the beginning of the 6th round, running back 30.5 point PPR, according to Fantasy Football Calculator. Not too bad. Stevenson is, if you're playing in a standard league, Stevenson would be certainly a guy to take a flyer on. Nicholas, who's another preseason star who's now on your fantasy radar.
So I think that this is kind of important to break down before I actually go into Trevor Lawrence. I drafted for my big time home league with some cash on the table last night. I was able to get Corey Davis.
This guy.
Thank you.
You got Corey Davis. Good.
That's right.
Not a fucking idiot.
I'm not a fucking idiot. And I got Trevor Lawrence. So to anyone out there who is a Trailer Park Boys fan, I now have the team Corey and Trevor. For the three of you who get that reference, thank you very much. Appreciate you listening. On Trevor Lawrence, I'm looking around at his ADP on various sites. Fantasy Pros has him as the quarterback 14. I believe Fantasy Football Calculator does as well. Yep. And Underdog, he's down at quarterback 16. This dude's been the prodigal son from a passing standpoint for a long time. He is the classic 6'6", 200 whatever pound guy. I think he's a little slight on his frame. And he's put up gaudy totals. I thought it was really impressive. So his first 2 seasons at Clemson, he threw for 3,200 and 3,600 yards, cleared 30 touchdowns both times, single-digit interceptions. He also, during that span, had a decent ground game production. So his sophomore year, over 500 yards on the ground, 9 rushing touchdowns. His final year in college, though, as a junior last year, 3,100 yards in just 10 games as opposed to 15, threw for 24 touchdowns, just 5 interceptions. He dialed back in his overall rushing, which is 203 yards, but he still scored 8 times. What you're looking at in Jacksonville is a decent offensive line and more passing game weapons than any quarterback would know what to do with. I kind of wanted to talk about Marvin Jones initially. But I decided to just kind of cover Jones with the overall Trevor Lawrence talk. So
Killing 2 Jaguars with 1 stone.
Getting him two birds stoned at once. So Chark has been the presumed number 1 receiver there. I think that he's talented, but he is not proven as a lot of people think that he is. And the first thing Urban Meyer said when he got there was that he told Chark to go gain a bunch of weight because he's a big receiver who plays small. 1, not great that he said it to Chark. 2, real bad that he said that publicly. Can't believe that. What they have there, aside from him, though, is Laviska Shenault, who is a beast after the catch, and Marvin Jones, who has played with Darrell Bevell, offensive coordinator, together when they were with the Lions for years. Jones is still one of the best contested catch guys in the league, and he has been balling out with Lawrence. I think that there's a non-zero I just shouldn't say non-zero. It's higher than that. There's a decent chance that Marvin Jones is actually the leading receiver on this team, not Chark or Laviska. Point is, and Colin Johnson's their 4th receiver. He's fantastic. They drafted Travis Etienne, who's a wide receiver that plays running back. James Robinson was a super, super high volume passing game running back last year. Like, there are so many guys for Lawrence to throw the ball to, and he's proven that he's a capable runner, especially in the red zone. I think it's going to be really hard for Lawrence to not beat his ADP this year. Like, he's drafted as a high-end quarterback too. And again, he's got a ton of weapons and he knows how to run. I think that I've been too low on Lawrence throughout the whole draft process. Just, I'm not a big fan of Urban Meyer, but at some point, like, that much talent around him. Yeah, I've got him as a quarterback 15 right now. And I kind of want to move him into the back end quarterback 1 rank. So I like Lawrence's prospects a lot this year.
Yeah. Yeah. We as a site, and I know we haven't updated our rankings in a while, but we as a site are pretty down. He's our QB 21 right now. And I honestly, I think I feel similarly to you, Nick, where it's like, maybe I've just been like a little too harsh on him for kind of no real reason. And now maybe it's time to reevaluate that. Also, Marvin Jones going in the 12th round. You be an idiot not to draft him.
I feel like Nick makes a great point about why he feels this way and about why someone who's optimistic about Trevor Lawrence would be optimistic about Trevor Lawrence. He is playing on an absolutely horrible team with a coach who has done some very baffling things this preseason. Even if Lawrence is very good, the Jaguars earned the hell out of that number 1 pick last year. And while they've brought in Marvin Jones and we've seen Laviska Shenault do some things, they're still going to be terrible. So in the spirit of the podcast, you said that you believe Trevor Lawrence will outperform his ADP. Right now, he's the quarterback 14. I will say that Trevor Lawrence finishes 15th or worse. All the caveats, if he needs to play some games, if he gets hurt, I don't win. But I do not think he's going to be very good. I'll say outside the top 15 at quarterback for Lawrence.
Yeah, spin the shit, Pete.
And that is a wheel bet. If you've just picked up the podcast, we like to, put our money where our mouth is. So Pete has a wonderful wheel of misfortune where we get to do bad things like dramatically read a Christina Aguilera song on the air or eat like 2 cups of mayonnaise, fun stuff like that.
We have some ones coming up too, because as the NFL season starts, Nick is going to pay out one to Clark pretty soon because Aaron Rodgers will be the Packers starting week 1 quarterback. And then Clark and I have one going about whether or not Taysom Hill starts for the Saints week 1, which
starting the season 2-0, boys.
Clark is feeling confident. And if you're wondering at home how Trevor Lawrence is our wide receiver, the website's QB 21 in a collective rating, it's because of Clark Barnes.
It's me. He's my quarterback 30. So tweet me. I guess
NFL Clark.
That's what people say.
Yeah. Create controversy.
Yeah. I hope I'm wrong. I never want anybody to have a bad season. I just,
you just hate the
That's
Jaguars.
So low.
Yeah.
That is crazy low.
Clark thinks Trevor Lawrence is going to throw 30 interceptions and 5 touchdowns.
I love this.
Who says
Still
that?
not named the starter by genius Urban Meyer.
Yeah, that is so bad. I mean, that is a fair point.
I mean,
Urban
that's
Meyer
a good point.
Moron.
Offensive coordinator who was forced to shackle Russell Wilson. Like,
I got into it with some Jags fans actually who were wanting to anoint Meyer, quote, and what a master of philosophy or master. I don't know. It was so fucking dumb.
What we can say confidently is Urban Meyer would not draft Corey Davis. He would not leave his draft without Corey Davis, like an idiot, like the idiot that he is. Urban Meyer, if you want to come onto the podcast and tell us why.
Wouldn't say idiot. I'm just saying may have a hard time adjusting to the NFL game.
Urban Meyer, come on to
when
the show.
Everybody gets to pay their players, it's a different game.
It's shocking how that recruitment doesn't really make a difference. Wrap us up, Clarky Barnes.
So speaking of getting inspiration from our coworkers here, Nick has been on Rondale Moore, wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals for all offseason. He's even said, I think it's within the realm of possibility for Moore to see over 100 targets. And I think that that's totally doable. I think a couple of the rookies that we've mentioned are interesting if certain things happen or break our way early in the season. Rondale Moore, I think, has a chance to be a back-end wide receiver too, or at least a flex immediately, because the Cardinals don't have anybody outside of DeAndre Hopkins as a competent pass catcher. Rondale Moore's been on the field with the starters. He has looked good against NFL competition. He is short, but he doesn't seem tiny when he's out there. But he also plays out of the slot, so being short's probably not going to kill him. He's getting open, he's running hard, and he's free. The Cardinals have no one else to pass the ball to. And I think Rondale Moore in his rookie year is going to be the second leading target getter, however you say that properly, on the Cardinals. And there's not many people on this.
Yeah. Well, I only watched the highlights for the first preseason game, so I haven't seen second week 2 for the Cardinals. But like the thing that I took away from it that I loved was that they were scripting the ball in Rondale Moore's hands. Like they were running screens, they were running jet sweeps. Like he was the man in motion, and he was the guy that they were getting creative with. And that's huge. That is huge for a guy who has the athleticism to like take the ball to the house wherever he touches it. And so the fact that Kliff Kingsbury is already trying to get in plays in the preseason that are specifically targeting Moore is a great sign for him in fantasy. And if you're playing in a PPR league, when a guy is targeted behind the line, it's pretty easy to catch it. And that's 1 point already for you. So nice little cheat code. It's why Deebo Samuel's so good.
So I apologize to whoever this was, because it was just during like the weekend when I was listening to a barrage of podcasts. I think it was either Hayden Winks or Adam Levitan, but one of these guys pointed out that Moore has already seen like 13 touches in his one preseason game or whatever. And Andy Isabella, I think, had 5 through his entire rookie year preseason. Kliff has locked on to this guy as someone who he just wants to load up targets with. And I think to some degree, this is like a similar principle as to why Pete and I are so friggin' high on Kyle Pitts, is that the team doesn't really have the option of not going to Rondale Moore. Well, like they could try to load up AJ Green early. They could try to give the ball to Christian Kirk, but dude, Kirk couldn't beat like, pardon me, but an old Larry Fitzgerald, an old wooden ship playing slot receiver. And it's the dude is an absolute beast. I just think that they're going to quickly get in there, and they're going to be partway through like week 1, and AJ is going to be asking for a breather. Christian Kirk's running the wrong routes, and they're just going to be like, fuck it, let's do this. And he might even get snaps in the backfield.
Saucy for a guy going in the 14th round. Like that is a lot. There's a lot on his plate that he could be walking into, which is highly desirable. There you go. There's our preseason stars who are now on our fantasy radars. And make sure you sticking around to the site, because we will, of course, be having more content coming at you as the preseason rolls on. But that's all we got for you this week. Please rate and subscribe to the podcast on your podcast platform of choice. And make sure you follow us on Twitter at NerdBallFF, not only just for our great takes, but also so that you can win yourself a Draft Guide booklet. You can follow myself on Twitter at Pete M. Rogers. Follow Clark at NFL Clark and Nick at Ginger__Nick without a K. And of course, make sure you check out all the amazing content we're putting out on the site, nerdballff.com. Until next week, my fellow nerds.